Dinner was my last chance. Then my daughter said this in front of everyone. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment the city you're watching from. I want to know just how far this moment has traveled. I spent 3 days preparing for that dinner. 3 days polishing the silver cutlery Richard left me. 3 days pressing the linen tablecloth we only used for holidays. 3 days perfecting a menu that was meant to save everything I'd worked for. At 68, you'd think I'd have grown used to disappointment. But that night, I still believed. I still hoped. My catering business, it wasn't just work. It was my lifeline after Richard died 5 years ago. When grief threatened to swallow me whole, I clung to the only thing that had ever brought me peace: cooking. What started as making comfort meals for neighbors became small events, then weddings. And finally a business that kept me afloat when Richard's medical bills had drained every cent of our savings. So yes, that dinner mattered. Candles flickered on the mahogany table, casting warm shadows across the crystal. The air smelled of herb-crusted salmon, rosemary potatoes, and fresh bread. I wore my navy dress, the one that made me feel confident, and twisted my silver hair into the elegant chignon Richard had always loved. 5 potential investors were coming that night. 5 people who could either rescue my business, or watch it crumble. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed the front of my dress, opened the door, and there he stood. Mr. Patterson, a well-known local businessman, smiled warmly. "Mrs. Crawford, thank you for having us," he said. "This is Desmond Whitmore, one of our lead investors." The name hit me like a wave. Desmond Whitmore. His silver hair. Those kind eyes. 50 years disappeared in an instant. It was him. The boy I'd loved with my whole teenage heart. The one who used to walk me home from school and kiss my hand before every test. The one who stopped writing after I married Richard, out of loneliness, out of pride, out of fear I'd be alone forever. He looked into my eyes and extended his hand. "It's a pleasure," he said. His voice was deeper now, worn by time, but still unmistakably his. I felt the old spark when our fingers touched. Did he recognize me? Back then I was Sullivan, not Crawford. The other guests arrived one by one: Mrs. Chen from a restaurant supply company, Mr. Davis from a group of event venues, and Ms. Rodriguez, a hospitality consultant. Dinner began. Conversation flowed easily. I shared my business model, client stories, my expansion dreams. Desmond asked thoughtful questions. And each time, he looked at me just a little too long, like he was trying to remember something. "This salmon is extraordinary," Mrs. Chen said. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" I was just about to respond when I heard the front door slam. My stomach dropped. Heavy steps echoed down the hallway, followed by the sound of heels being kicked off. Then came the voice I dreaded most in that moment. Well, she slurred. My mother playing hostess to people who think she's worth something. Lennox. My daughter. She stood in the doorway, 40 years old, hair a mess, designer blouse stained, eyes glassy. The sharp scent of alcohol hit the room like smoke. I tried to stay calm. "Lennox," I said gently. "These are the investors I told you about. Maybe you could." "Investors?" she laughed, harsh and hollow. "You mean the people Mom's trying to trick into thinking she has her life together?" Silence fell like a curtain. Mr. Patterson shifted in his seat. Mrs. Chen set down her fork. Desmond watched me with unreadable eyes. "Maybe they should know the truth," Lennox continued, stumbling forward. "You want to invest in a woman who couldn't even raise her own daughter? Someone who poured her heart into a business and forgot to be a mother?" My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. "Lennox, please," I whispered. But she wasn't done. She grabbed an empty wine glass and raised it like a trophy. "You know what, Mom? You're being stupid," she spat. "Stop pretending to be someone important. Be useful for once in your life. Go wash the damn dishes." Then she dropped the glass. It shattered. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Like the final crack in everything I had tried to hold together. Inside, something broke. The investors were gone within 10 minutes. Polite smiles. Forced handshakes. Empty promises to be in touch. But we all knew they wouldn't call. That night, I sat in the kitchen alone. The dishes she mocked me for were still in the sink. The table I'd set with love sat in ruin. But somewhere beneath the humiliation, a fire sparked. A part of me remembered the girl I used to be, before Richard, before grief, before I let shame silence me. I'd built this business from nothing. And one night, even that night, would not be the end of my story. I stood in the doorway, watching the last pair of tail lights vanish into the night, each one dragging a piece of my dreams with it. Upstairs, Lennox had disappeared without a word. She left behind silence, and the shattered glass that still glittered on the hardwood floor, sharp and jagged, like the pieces of my heart. Except one person remained. Desmond. "Let me help you clean up," he said gently, already crouched to gather the broken crystal. "You don't have to," I whispered, though even I could hear how hollow it sounded. "I'm sure you have somewhere more important to be." He paused. Held a fragment of glass in his hand. Then looked up at me with those same gentle eyes I'd fallen for half a century ago. "Actually, Myrtle. I don't." He said my name, my real name. Not Mrs. Crawford. And just like that, I knew, he had known all along. We worked in silence. Sweeping, stacking plates, rinsing away the wreckage. My hands moved on autopilot, but my mind was miles away, trapped in the spiral of shame and memories. When everything was finally clean, we found ourselves standing in my kitchen, the air heavy with everything left unsaid. "How long have you known?" I asked. "The moment I read your business proposal," he said softly. "Sullivan, who became Crawford. I've wondered about you for years. Wondered what happened after you married Richard." There was pain in his voice, real, lingering pain. I leaned against the counter, suddenly feeling all 68 years in my bones. "You stopped writing," I said. "After that first semester, your letters just stopped." Desmond's face changed. His jaw tensed. "I never stopped writing, Myrtle." His voice was tight. "I sent letters every week for 2 years. When you didn't respond, I finally called your house." "Your mother answered. She told me you were married, and didn't want to hear from me again." The room tilted. "What?" I said, barely able to breathe. "She said you'd moved on. That reaching out would only make things harder for everyone." I believed her. "I thought you were happy." My mother. The same woman who looked down on Desmond for growing up on the wrong side of town. The woman who nudged me, no, pushed me, toward Richard, the stable banker's son with a promising future. I had married Richard in a fog of heartbreak and pressure, convinced Desmond had forgotten me the moment he left for college. "I never got your letters," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I thought you'd moved on too." We stood there, separated by a kitchen island, and 50 years of misunderstanding. "I never married," Desmond said softly. "I never found anyone who made me feel the way you did." Tears I'd been holding back all night spilled free. "I had a good marriage," I said, though it sounded more like I was trying to convince myself. "Richard and I were content. But I never forgot you either." The next morning hit hard. I was still wearing the same dress, sitting in the kitchen when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick it up. "Mrs. Crawford? This is Janet from Hillrest Country Club. I'm calling about the Henderson anniversary party." My stomach dropped. The Hendersons were one of my biggest clients, a 50th anniversary event for 200 guests. The contract was worth 3 months of income. "Yes, Janet. How can I help you?" "Well, it's a bit awkward," she said. "But we've received some troubling information about your business. I'm afraid we'll have to cancel the contract." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Cancel? But the event is in 2 weeks. Everything's already planned. The deposits. I understand, truly. But someone called yesterday claiming to be your daughter. She expressed concerns about your reliability. My blood turned to ice. She said you've been having memory issues, problems with organization. She felt it was her duty to warn us before anything unfortunate happened. Lennox. Mrs. Crawford? Are you still there? Yes, I managed. Can I ask exactly what was said? She was quite specific. It was concerning. I swallowed hard. I assure you, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I'm sorry, Mrs. Crawford. But the decision is final. We'll honor the cancellation clause. The cancellation clause. Which meant I'd get maybe 10% of what I was owed. Not even enough to cover the supplies I'd already purchased. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. This wasn't just fallout from last night. This was sabotage. My own daughter was actively destroying the one thing that had kept me going since Richard's death, the only thing that had ever been truly mine. The doorbell rang. Desmond stood on my porch, holding 2 coffee cups and a paper bag. I brought breakfast, he said quietly. I figured you could use someone to talk to. I let him in, my throat too tight for words. Over coffee at the kitchen table, I told him everything, about the phone call, the cancellation, Lennox's lies, and how everything I'd built seemed to be falling apart around me. How long has she been doing this to you? He asked, his voice low with restrained anger. I don't know, I said. Maybe months. Maybe longer. I thought it was just the economy. Or, maybe I was getting too old for this. Desmond reached across the table and took my hand. You're not too old, Myrtle, he said. You're one of the strongest people I've ever known. You always were. But as I sat there, holding hands with the man I once thought I'd lost forever, while my daughter quietly destroyed my life just upstairs, I began to wonder if strength had anything to do with it anymore. By noon, I heard the sound of Lennox finally waking up, her footsteps dragging down the stairs, followed by a muttered curse. She appeared in the doorway, wrapped in one of Richard's old college sweatshirts, hair a tangled mess, mascara smudged like bruises beneath her bloodshot eyes. Without even looking at me, she went straight to the coffee maker. Movements sharp, practiced. Like someone who'd done this too many times before. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady. Oh, God, Mom, she groaned. Not now. My head is killing me. She poured coffee into a chipped white mug, added 3 heaping spoonfuls of sugar, and took a long sip, like it was medicine. Without looking up, she muttered. Whatever this is, can it wait until I'm human again? No, I said. I stood from the table. My hands were trembling, but I kept my voice steady. The Hendersons canceled their anniversary party this morning. Lennox froze. The mug paused midair. For just a second, something flickered across her face, guilt maybe, or something far colder. Then it vanished, replaced by her usual armor of indifference. That's too bad, she said, not meeting my eyes. Maybe they found someone better. I stepped closer. They canceled because someone, claiming to be my daughter, called them yesterday. Told them I was having memory problems. That I couldn't be trusted. The words hung heavy in the air. She set her mug down with surgical precision, no more shaky hands, no more hangover. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said flatly. But her voice lacked conviction. I stared at her, really looked. Don't lie to me, Lennox. Not anymore. How many clients have you called? How long have you been sabotaging my business? Something shifted in her face, a mask sliding off. When she looked up again, the indifference was gone. Her eyes were sharp. Cold. Predatory. You really want to know, she said, leaning back against the counter. Fine. Yes. I called the Hendersons. The Morrisons last month. That corporate event in September? Me. I've been making sure they know exactly who you are. The confession hit like a slap. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this to me? Lennox let out a hollow laugh. A sound with no warmth left in it. Because you never deserved any of it. She straightened, voice rising with each word. This house. This business. The sympathy. The respect. You stole it all. I blinked, stunned. Stole it? I built this from nothing. After your father died, While I needed you, she cut in, voice like a whip. While I was watching Dad die, begging for your attention. You were playing entrepreneur. You chose your little catering fantasy over your daughter. The silence crackled between us. I saw her clearly now, not just the bitterness, but the pain beneath it. Lennox, I said softly. I was grieving, too. The business, it kept me breathing. It gave me something to hold on to when everything else fell apart. She shoved off the counter, pacing like a storm building. No, she snapped. What kept you going was the attention. The compliments. Everyone calling you brave and strong. Poor widow Myrtle, making it on her own. You loved being admired. That's not true. Isn't it? She hissed, rounding on me. When's the last time you even asked about my life? What I do, how I feel, anything. You care more about canapes and table linens than your own child. The words hit like truth wrapped in poison. She wasn't entirely wrong. Since Richard died, I'd poured everything into the business, not just time, but my grief, my fear, my loneliness. I thought I was doing it for both of us. I was trying to take care of us, I said quietly. Her eyes narrowed. No. You were replacing Dad with a business that would never leave you. And guess what? You chose it over me. Now you're going to lose both. Before I could speak, the doorbell rang. I turned toward the window and saw silver hair glinting in the morning sun. Desmond. Lennox followed my gaze. Her mouth curled into something between a smile and a sneer. Perfect, she said. Your boyfriend's here. It's not what you think. She rolled her eyes. Oh, I know exactly what this is. Some sad old man sniffing around a lonely widow. How predictable. She moved toward the door with a sudden grace, not the sluggish shuffle of a hangover, but the smooth poise of a practiced manipulator. Lennox, please don't. But it was too late. She flung open the door, all fake sunshine and southern charm. Mr. Whitmore, she chirped. So lovely to see you again. I just wanted to apologize for last night, I'd had a bit too much wine. Not exactly my finest moment. Desmond glanced past her. His eyes met mine, concerned, searching. I came to check on your mother, he said gently. Wanted to make sure she was okay after everything. Lennox's smile stayed fixed, but her voice turned sugary slick, venom wrapped in velvet. That's so thoughtful. Though I do worry about older men who prey on vulnerable widows. Especially ones who show up the day after her business collapses. It's a little convenient, don't you think? Lennox. I stepped forward, my face burning. It's fine, Myrtle, Desmond said quietly, his eyes never leaving Lennox's face. I understand, she's just being protective. Protective? Lennox laughed, sharp and bitter. Oh, Mr. Whitmore, you have no idea how protective I can be. My mother has already lost one business opportunity due to her declining judgment. I'd hate to see her make another mistake. The threat was unmistakable. Desmond heard it too, I could tell by the way his jaw tightened, though his voice stayed even, professional. Perhaps I should go, he said, turning to me with regret in his eyes. We can discuss the investment opportunity another time. No, I said, surprised by the firmness in my voice. Desmond, please stay. I turned to Lennox. Lennox was just leaving. My daughter's mask slipped completely then, exposing the fury beneath. "Actually, Mom," she said, voice cold, "I think we need to have a family discussion. About boundaries. About appropriate behavior for women your age. About what happens to little old ladies who don't listen to their daughter's advice." She stepped closer to Desmond, lowering her voice to a threatening whisper, far more chilling than if she'd shouted. "My mother is very fragile right now, Mr. Whitmore. Grief does terrible things to the mind. It makes people vulnerable. It makes them forget what's real, and what's fantasy." Her smile was razor-sharp. "It would be such a shame if she got confused about your intentions, and embarrassed herself further." I watched this exchange with growing horror, finally seeing my daughter for what she truly was, not a grieving child I'd tried to protect, but a manipulative woman willing to destroy anyone who threatened her control over my life. The only question was, what was I going to do about it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Lennox's threats echoing through my mind. Every creak of the old house made me wonder if she was awake too, plotting her next move to strip away what little remained of my independence. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make tea. The kitchen felt different in the dark. Strange. Shadows twisted familiar objects into strangers. I was reaching for the kettle when I heard it. The soft rustle of papers coming from Richard's old study. I crept down the hallway, barefoot, silent on the hardwood floor. The study door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, I saw the warm glow of the desk lamp. Lennox sat at Richard's desk, hunched over paperwork. Documents spread before her like a battle map. My business records. Financial statements. Insurance policies. The deed to the house. I pushed the door open wider. She looked up, completely unashamed. "Mom," she said calmly, as if rifling through my private files at 3 a.m. was perfectly normal. "I was wondering when you'd notice." "What are you doing?" She leaned back in Richard's leather chair, a document in hand. "Research," she said. "Making sure I understand exactly what we're dealing with here." I stepped into the room, heart pounding. "Those are my private papers." "Actually, some of them aren't." She held up a bank statement. "This joint account, for instance, the one you opened when Dad got sick, with both our names on it. I've been monitoring it for months." I remembered that account, opened during the worst of Richard's illness. When I was overwhelmed with hospital bills and needed help managing the finances. I'd added Lennox so she could write checks for prescriptions and appointments. "You've been stealing from me." "Stealing?" Lennox raised an eyebrow, her tone mockingly innocent. "I'm not stealing, Mom. I'm protecting family assets from poor financial decisions, like your bleeding catering business. Or your new romance with a man who's clearly after your savings." She stood and began circling the desk, slow and deliberate. In the lamplight, her face looked sharp. Predatory. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, eerily calm. "You're going to end this ridiculous flirtation with Mr. Whitmore. You're going to shut down the catering business before you waste what's left of Dad's life insurance. And you're going to sign power of attorney over to me, so I can ensure you don't make any more catastrophic mistakes." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm completely serious." She picked up another document. A power of attorney form, already filled out and waiting for my signature. "I've done my research, Mom. Women your age, especially widows, are prime targets for financial abuse. Desmond Whitmore is probably running a dozen scams just like this one. You don't know anything about Desmond. I know he disappeared for 50 years and suddenly shows up just as you're vulnerable, and have money to lose." Lennox's voice hardened. "I also know that if you don't sign this willingly, I'll have you declared incompetent. Those phone calls I made about your memory problems? They're just the beginning. I can find doctors who will testify that you're not capable of making sound financial decisions." The room spun around me. "You would do that to your own mother?" Just to protect what's left of our family's assets? Absolutely. She gestured to the papers spread across the desk. I've already documented your erratic behavior, your declining business, the poor judgment you showed bringing a stranger into our home. It wouldn't be hard to build a case. I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Worse than a stranger. An enemy. And if I refuse? Lennox smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen. Then you'll lose everything anyway. But publicly. In court. With all your former clients and neighbors watching as your own daughter testifies about your mental decline. She moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Sign the papers, Mom. Make this easy, on both of us. I looked down at the power of attorney form, at my name printed in careful block letters, at the signature line that would hand control of my entire life to the person who'd been systematically destroying it. I need time to think, I said finally. You have until tomorrow morning. Lennox gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. Sleep on it. But remember, this is happening, whether you cooperate or not. The only question is whether you want to maintain some dignity in the process. I turned and walked back to my bedroom, my legs unsteady. But instead of going to sleep, I sat on the edge of my bed and made a phone call. Desmond answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep, but immediately alert when he heard mine. Myrtle? What's wrong? I need to see you, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Can you meet me somewhere? Somewhere Lennox won't find us. Of course. Where? I thought of the little diner where Richard and I used to have breakfast on Sunday mornings, before his illness, before everything changed. Murphy's Diner. On Elm Street. 7 a.m. I'll be there. He paused. Myrtle, are you safe? Was I safe in my own home, with my own daughter planning to steal my life away, piece by piece? For now, I said. But Desmond. I think I'm going to need your help. The next morning, I left the house before Lennox woke up, taking only my purse and the spare key I kept hidden under the garden gnome Richard had always hated. As I drove to the diner, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not fear. Not grief. Not the crushing weight of obligation that had defined my life since Richard's death. Determination. Lennox thought she knew me. Thought she could manipulate and control me like she had for years. Thought I was just a weak-old woman, too afraid of losing her love to fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she was. When I walked into Murphy's Diner and saw Desmond waiting in our old booth, his eyes full of concern and something deeper, something that looked like love, I knew I wasn't facing this battle alone. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like myself again. And that woman, the one who had loved fearlessly at 17 and built a business from nothing at 63, wasn't going down without a fight. I want to disappear, I told Desmond across the worn Formica table at Murphy's Diner. Not literally. But I want Lennox to think she's won, until it's too late for her to stop what's coming. Desmond stirred his coffee slowly, processing everything I'd told him about the power of attorney, the threats, the systematic destruction of my business. His jaw was tight with controlled anger, but his voice remained calm. What do you need from me? Your investment offer. Is it still on the table? Of course it is. But Myrtle, are you sure about this? Once we start moving your assets, there's no going back. I thought about Lennox sleeping peacefully in my house, confident she'd broken me completely. There's already no going back, I said. She made sure of that. Over the next 3 hours, Desmond and I planned my escape with the precision of a military operation. He had connections, lawyers, accountants, people who specialized in protecting assets from family predators. By the time we left the diner, I had appointments scheduled, and a new sense of purpose burning in my chest. I returned home to find Lennox in the kitchen. The power of attorney papers were spread on the counter like a death warrant. There you are, she said, without looking up from her phone. I was starting to worry you'd done something stupid. Just went for a drive, I said, hanging my keys on the hook by the door. Needed to clear my head. She glanced up then, studying my face. And? Have you made your decision? I moved to the coffee maker, keeping my back to her so she couldn't see my expression. I've been thinking about what you said. About protecting the family assets. Good, she said. There was satisfaction in her voice. I know this is hard, Mom, but it's for the best. I turned around, letting my shoulders slump slightly, aging myself with posture alone. I just don't understand how it came to this. Your father always said family should stick together. Dad's gone, Lennox said, her tone sharper now. And he left us with a mess to clean up. Medical bills. A failing business. And now this situation, with your judgment being compromised. My judgment being compromised. I let a tremor slip into my voice, playing the part she expected. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am getting too old to handle things on my own. Something shifted in Lennox's posture. She was buying it. I'll sign the papers, I said quietly. But I need a few days. To get my affairs in order, close out some accounts, notify clients. Lennox nodded, her smile almost predatory. Of course. Take the time you need. But remember, Mom, no more contact with Desmond Whitmore. That ends today. I understand, I lied. What I actually understood was that my daughter had underestimated me, completely. Over the next week, I played my part to perfection. I moved slower. Spoke softer. Let Lennox believe she was managing my decline with calm, compassionate efficiency. She monitored my phone calls. Checked my mail. Hovered over every decision like a dutiful daughter shielding her fragile mother from the world. What she didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead. While she thought I was closing business accounts, I was transferring every asset into a new company structure, one created by Desmond's lawyers. The catering business wasn't dying. It was being reborn under a new name, with new ownership, and full legal protection from any claim Lennox might try to make. When she thought I was canceling contracts, I was actually handing them off to the new entity. Desmond's team contacted each client Lennox had turned against me. They explained the truth, carefully, thoroughly. Most were horrified to learn they'd been manipulated. Many offered apologies. Nearly all returned. And the house, what I thought I'd have to sacrifice, turned out to be my strongest shield. While reviewing the deed with Desmond's attorney, we found something interesting. When Richard and I bought the property 40 years ago, we'd structured ownership in a way that protected it from precisely the kind of legal sabotage Lennox was attempting. She could threaten all she wanted. She had no claim. No power to force me out of my own home. Friday morning. 1 week after her ultimatum. Lennox sat me down at the kitchen table, the power of attorney papers laid neatly between us. Are you ready, Mom? She asked, pen in hand. I looked at the documents. At the careful, calculated language that would have handed her control of my life. Then I looked at her, my daughter, who had spent months dismantling my happiness under the guise of concern. Actually, I said, my voice suddenly strong and clear, I've changed my mind. The pen froze in her hand. What? I've changed my mind. I stood up, feeling taller than I had in years. I'm not signing anything. Her face cycled rapidly through disbelief, confusion, and then fury. Mom, we discussed this. You agreed. I agreed to nothing. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden Richard and I had planted together. I listened to your threats. Your manipulations. Your lies about my mental state. But I never agreed to hand my life over to someone who's been sabotaging it for months. You can't be serious, she said, rising from her chair as the papers scattered to the floor. Without this protection, you're going to lose everything. I turned to face her. And for the first time I didn't hide my smile. Too late for that warning, don't you think? You're the one who's been trying to destroy my business, my life. Something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Fine. If you won't do this willingly, I'll have you declared incompetent. I have documentation. Witnesses. You have lies, I cut in. And lies don't hold up under scrutiny. I moved to Richard's old desk and pulled out a manila folder. Like these phone records, showing exactly when you called my clients. These bank statements, proving you've been taking money from our joint account. Or this, I held up a small recording device, our conversation last week, where you threatened to destroy me if I didn't sign over power of attorney. Lennox's face drained of color. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? I set the folder down in front of her. I've already filed a police report. My lawyer has copies of everything. And as of this morning, your name has been removed from all my accounts. The silence between us stretched long and heavy, 40 years of motherhood collapsing into a single, irreversible moment. You're making a mistake, Lennox said at last, her voice hollow. The only mistake I made was believing you'd changed. That underneath all the manipulation and anger, there was still some trace of my daughter. I picked up the unsigned documents and walked to the fireplace. But that little girl died a long time ago, didn't she? I dropped the papers into the flames and watched them blacken and curl. Pack your things, I said without turning around. You have until tomorrow to find somewhere else to live. 6 months later. I stood in the kitchen of my new catering facility, watching Desmond arrange flowers on the prep counter while soft jazz played from the radio. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting a golden glow that made the stainless steel countertops gleam like polished silver. The roses are beautiful, I said, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind. At 68, I thought romance was behind me. But being with Desmond felt like coming home to a part of myself I'd long forgotten. Not as beautiful as the woman wearing them, he murmured, turning to kiss my forehead. I'd pinned a single white rose to my apron, a tradition we started the day I accepted his partnership in both business and life. The new company, Memories Catering, was thriving beyond anything I had dared to imagine. And for the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was living. Word had gotten around about what Lennox had done, and the community's response was nothing short of overwhelming. Former clients returned with heartfelt apologies and new bookings. New customers sought us out not just for the food, but for the story. A testament to resilience, to reinvention. Local papers ran features about the grandmother who fought back, though I always insisted they focus on the meals, not the melodrama. We'd moved the business out of my home and into a bright, commercial kitchen that felt like the dream I'd never dared to name. Desmond hadn't just invested money, he brought experience, strategy, and a calm confidence that balanced my creative chaos. His background in restaurant management complemented my culinary instincts like salt to butter. For the first time in my life, I had a true partner. In every sense of the word. The bell above the front door chimed, followed by the low murmur of familiar voices in the reception area. A moment later, Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, her husband of 50 years at her side. Myrtle, she said warmly, I hope we're not interrupting. Never, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. What brings you by? We wanted to apologize again, Mr. Henderson said, his weathered face sincere, and to ask if you might, possibly, consider catering our anniversary party after all. We know it's short notice. Mrs. Henderson stepped in quickly. And after the way we treated you, we'd understand completely if you said no. I glanced at Desmond. He gave me a small, encouraging nod. When were you thinking? Next month, she said, tentative. 200 guests. I know, it's exactly what we cancelled before. But we're hoping we can make it right. I remembered the sting of their cancellation. How it had gutted me, how it had seemed like the final blow in a series of betrayals. But then I looked around this kitchen, at the clean lines and gleaming counters, at the light filtering through the tall windows, at the business I'd rebuilt from the ashes. We'd be honored to cater your anniversary, I said. Let's sit down and talk about what you have in mind. As we discussed menu options and decorating ideas, I felt a quiet, unexpected warmth. Not revenge. Not vindication. Peace. Grace. A second chance, for all of us. After the Hendersons left, Desmond and I cleaned the kitchen side by side, moving with the ease and rhythm of people who understood each other without needing to speak. It was in moments like this, unremarkable to anyone else, that I felt most thankful for the path that had led me here. "Any regrets?" he asked, as if reading my thoughts. I paused, drying the last plate and hanging up the towel. I thought of Lennox. She'd moved out of state not long after I'd made it clear she was no longer welcome in my home. We hadn't spoken since that day. I'd heard, through the grapevine, that she was struggling. Financially. Personally. She'd had to get a job for the first time in years. A part of me, the mother part, still worried. That part would never completely die. But I'd learned the difference between love and enabling. Lennox had made her choices. Now she was living with the consequences. "No regrets," I said finally. "Not about standing up for myself. Not about choosing my happiness over her control. And definitely not about letting you back into my life." Desmond smiled and pulled me into a quiet embrace. "Good," he said, "because I have something to ask you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught. "Myrtle Sullivan," he said, dropping to one knee in the middle of our flower-dusted kitchen, "I loved you when we were 17, and I love you even more now at 68. Will you marry me?" Inside the box was a simple diamond ring. Modest. Classic. Perfect, for the woman I'd become. "Are you sure you want to marry an old widow with complicated family history?" I asked, though I was already nodding. "Yes," he said. "I want to marry the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. The one who built something from nothing. Who stood up against the odds. Who chose love over fear." The ring slid onto my finger as if it had been waiting 50 years for this moment. We planned a small ceremony for the following spring. Just a few close friends. Maybe a couple of clients who had become like family. A simple celebration. Of survival. Of second chances. Of love, finally, fully, on our own terms. Nothing fancy. Nothing that needed to prove a point to anyone. Just two people who had somehow found their way back to each other against all odds. The phone rang as we were locking up for the day. I almost didn't answer. We were officially closed, and I was eager to get home and start dinner. But something made me pick up. Memories Catering. "This is Myrtle. Mom." The voice was small, uncertain. Nothing like the competent manipulator who had tried to control my life 6 months ago. My hand tightened around the phone. "Lennox?" "I've been thinking about calling for weeks," she said. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear from me." I closed my eyes, feeling that familiar tug of maternal concern. "What do you need?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "I don't need anything. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I know it probably doesn't mean much now, but it's true." I sank into the chair behind the front counter. Desmond moved to stand beside me, his hand warm on my shoulder. "Where are you?" "Portland. I got a job at a restaurant. Nothing fancy, just waiting tables, but it's honest work." She hesitated. "Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. What I did to you, how I treated you, it was unforgivable." "Then why are you calling?" "Because I finally understand what I lost. Not the money, or the house, or the business. I lost my mother, the best person I've ever known. And I threw it all away because I was angry and selfish and stupid." Tears stung my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. "What do you want from me, Lennox?" "Nothing," she said again. "Just the chance to tell you that you were right to fight back. You were right to choose yourself. And I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be." The line went quiet, save for the sound of our breathing. I heard about your engagement, she said, finally, addressing Desmond. I'm happy for you, Mom. Really? How did you? Small world, I guess. A friend saw the announcement in the paper. She laughed, but it sounded sad. He sounds like a good man. You deserve that. I looked at Desmond, the patient, kind man who had waited 50 years to love me properly. He is, I said. I should let you go, Lennox said softly. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better. It might take a while, but I'm trying. After I hung up, Desmond and I sat in the quiet of our empty restaurant, absorbing the conversation. How do you feel? He asked. Like a mother, I said honestly, but also like a woman who knows her worth. I would always love Lennox, that was the blessing and the burden of being a parent. But I would never again sacrifice my happiness for someone who didn't value it. Some lessons come too late to change the past, but just in time to save the future. As we drove home together, my engagement ring catching the last light of the setting sun, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago. Broken, defeated, ready to give up everything to keep peace with a daughter who'd never respected my sacrifice. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Happier. More whole than I ever imagined possible. At 68, I was finally learning that it's never too late to choose yourself. And sometimes, that choice is the most loving thing you can do, for everyone. Now, I'm curious about you, listening to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts below. Meanwhile, I'm leaving you on the final screen with 2 more stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching all the way through.